Hi class, this presentation is going to introduce you to sentence fragments. So hopefully this is review for most of you, but I know sometimes it can get a little confusing or overwhelming. English certainly is a very difficult language to master, even for those of us who speak it natively. So we're going to be looking at parts of a sentence. All sentences have specific elements that make them complete. Number one, you have the subject. The subject is always what the sentence is about, and this is usually where the noun is located. Our next part of every complete sentence is the predicate. So the predicate always says what the subject is doing, right? And since it's an action, this always contains the verb. So every sentence must have a noun and a verb, right? And the extra words make up the subject and the predicate. Oftentimes, sentences will have an object. Objects can be nouns, pronouns, or noun phrases that receive or are affected by the action of the verb in the sentence. You don't need an object in every sentence to have a complete sentence, but oftentimes they are present. So remember, noun, person, place, or thing, and a verb is an action word. So now we're going to break down parts of complex sentences. So an independent clause can stand on its own, right? It's independent. It doesn't need to be joined to anything else because it's a complete sentence all on its own. They always have three components. There is a subject that tells the reader what the sentence is about. There's the predicate that tells the reader what the subject is doing. And number three, this is the most important part. Independent clauses always express a complete thought. It doesn't leave any information to be desired. So just because a sentence contains a subject and a predicate doesn't necessarily mean it's complete. It always has to express a complete thought. So let's look at some examples. An independent clause can be something as simple as two basic words. Jim reads. Jim's a subject, right? We know what he is doing. He is reading. This is a complete thought that was expressed. It's something that's said. The reader now knows that Jim reads. So let's look at dependent clauses, the opposite of an independent clause. A dependent clause does not express a complete thought. There are many reasons that a clause can be considered dependent. Most likely we'll have marker words. These marker words, I gave some examples here on the slide, or conjunctions. I know a lot of times people hear in elementary school, middle school, high school, you cannot start a sentence with a conjunction. And the reason is these conjunctions depend on other information. So a complete thought is not expressed. And, or, nor, but, or yet. If you start a sentence with, but I don't want to go to my room, it depends on something that comes before it, right? So in order to have these sentences make sense, the dependent clause must be joined to another clause, or else it creates a sentence fragment. So if we look at this example on the slide below, because I forgot my homework, we see that the sentence starts with a marker word, because, and we know because of that, right, that the sentence is a fragment. So even though we have a complete subject and predicate, right, our subject is I, and our predicate is forgot my homework. We still have that marker word. So if we took away because, it would be a complete thought. I forgot my homework. But because that because is there, it makes it incomplete. Because I forgot my homework, what? Because I forgot my homework, I'm getting a bad grade, or I had to turn around and go home because I forgot my homework. It leaves something to be desired. So if you're reading a sentence and it leaves something to be desired, that's a good indicator that it is a dependent clause. So we're going to look at a couple examples. And I want you to just think to yourself whether these are a fragment or a complete sentence. Number one, before class today. If we take a look at that, hopefully you recognize that as a fragment, right? Because what happened before class today? It leaves something to be desired. And we could even join that with number two, right? Before class today, I had a large coffee. That gives the information. So number two is an independent clause. It stands on its own. I had a large coffee. Just because independent clauses stand on their own doesn't mean that they have all of the complete and necessary information all of the time, right? Otherwise, we would only speak in monologues. We would not have any dialogue. So, for example, number 2, it can prompt a response question, but it is complete in itself. I had a large coffee. Oh, what kind of coffee did you have this morning? Or where did you have that coffee? It can still be a dialogue, but it does contain all of the necessary information in that one sentence. Number 3, tomorrow looks fun, is a complete sentence. Number 4, why not? This one is very confusing. Questions are a little bit tricky. Questions have an implied subject, so number 4 technically is a complete sentence. Even though questions typically depend on other information around them, it's a little bit tricky. In your writing, you won't really be using questions very often, so you don't have to worry about this too much. So let's go to number 5. Although I like animals. Hopefully you notice the presence of that marker word there, although, and that is turning it into a dependent clause. So if we look at number 5, although I like animals. Although I like animals, what? Although I like animals, I don't have any. Maybe is how we could make it complete. Or if you take away the although, it is a complete thought on its own. I like animals. Number 6, before I went to the store, we have that marker word before there, so that shows us that it is a dependent clause or sentence fragment. Number 7, but I love my dog. But is a conjunction, so that's our marker word showing that that is a fragment. Take that away and you have a complete sentence. So remember, a fragment and a dependent clause can be the same thing. If a dependent clause stands on its own, it is a sentence fragment. A complete sentence is an independent clause. And in our next presentation, we'll go over joining dependent and independent clauses to make one complex sentence. So number 8, I hate Mondays. Not only is that true, but it is also a complete sentence. Number 9, who likes books? This is a tricky one. If it was a question, it would be complete. But since it is a statement, unless you're talking about your friend named who, it is incomplete. So you'd want to switch that with a specific subject. Mary likes books. And number 10, who reads? Another tricky question, and that is complete. So just a quick review. Every complete sentence has a subject and a predicate, maybe an object, but it is not necessary. Subject is what the sentence is about, where the noun is. Predicate is what the subject does, where the verb is. And the object is the noun, pronoun, or noun phrase that receives or is affected by the action of the verb in a sentence. Not always present. But what is always present in a complete sentence? Yes, that is, it expresses a complete thought.